Good evening, welcome back. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this meeting is a policy work session with Ms. Pam Howley, our policy coordinator. We're going to, at this time, do a roll call for attendance. I'm going to call each board member's name. If they're present, they will say whatever they need to say they're here. Vice President Morgel.
Here.
Director Hamada.
Here.
Director Clark.
Present.
And Director Farr.
Present.
And I'm, of course, here. So we're going to start our policy work session, and I'm going to call upon Superintendent Vela to do introductions and start our evening.
Thank you, President Benno, and welcome back. It's been a while since we've done our work back to policy work. We were doing a lot of work early on and had a little space between, but we certainly are going to pick up where we left off, and I'd like to invite Ms. Hawley to come up to get us started for this evening. Ms. Hawley.
Good evening, President Benno, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Santello. Tonight, we're going to pick back up. We have 10 policies on the docket. See if we can get through most, if not all of them. Just as we have done in the past, run through the PowerPoint, and you have them at your spot, so you can look at it afterwards when I put the other policies up in Word documents. So we every time talk about the policy classifications. We're dealing mostly with essentials, but we have some discretionary on tonight. Policy and procedure, the what and the how. We're going to start with our highly capable programs, Policy 2190, it's a first reading. Policy 3415, accommodating students with diabetes, also a first reading and an essential. Policy 3420, anaphylaxis prevention and response, first reading, and that's the first time I've been able to say that word without stumbling today. Essential. Policy 2108, learning assistance program, first reading and essential. 3141, non-resident students, first reading and essential. 3246, restraint, isolation, and other uses of reasonable force, first reading and essential. Policy 4215, use of tobacco, nicotine products, and delivery devices, also a first reading and an essential policy. Policy 6119, uncollected non-tax revenue, first reading. WASDA no longer has this policy. KSD wants to keep this policy. It is not any type of discretionary, encouraged, or essential, but Mr. Eric would like to have this policy. Policy 1210, annual organizational meeting. It's our second reading. It's a discretionary policy. And Policy 4220, complaints concerning staff or programs. This is the fifth reading, and it is also a discretionary policy. Any policies moving forward will appear on the May 24th regular meeting agenda. And our next policy work session is June 21st. So we have a bit of time in between. Okay. So our first policy is 2190, highly capable programs. And what I'd like to tell you about this policy is that recent studies show that children living in low-income areas or who are from racial, ethnic, and language minorities are less likely to be selected for advanced programs even when their test scores and grades are similar to white or middle-class students. These reports have not gone unnoticed by the legislature, which in 2018 passed in gross second substitute Senate Bill 6362, requiring districts to have clearly stated identification procedures for their highly capable programs and to implement those procedures. Additionally, the legislation establishes that school districts' identification policy and procedure for highly capable programs must include the following 4 criteria. Districts must use multiple pathways for qualification, and no single criterion may disqualify a student. Districts must base their selection of students on benchmark local norms, but local norms may not be used if they are more restrictive criteria than national norms at the same percentile. Districts may not use subjective measures such as teacher recommendations or report card grades to screen out or disqualify a student. And to the extent practicable, districts must screen and assess students in native language of the student. The highly capable program plan was approved by you, the board, last fall, October 26th at the regular meeting. Director Hamada noted that she would like a statement added that every effort will be made to look at this entire program and numbers with an equity lens and minimize any barriers that could prevent our underserved BIPOC students from access to apply. Any questions on this policy?
I guess we can open up for discussion.
Well, I just like, this is not a question. I mean, our financial director, Ben Rarick, answered in-depth a bunch of questions. When I really looked through this, I took a lot deeper dive, and I want to even deeper dive, but I think that's the only thing that I saw, that I really wanted to emphasize that. I mean, there was parts in it that were emphasized, but I just thought, we really want to bring that forward, and that's just my suggestion, to put it right up in front, that other sentence or something like that, so.
I had a question, because it says kindergarten through 12th grade, and so I was just curious, like, I know that we serve preschool too. Can we make it just pre-K 12 as we move forward with things? Because that's what our district serves. Is that editorial, or is that change anything, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure, President Beno, if that's language that's in the law or not, but if I could have Ms. Cynthia Green come up and to talk about the highly capable program, or one of your team, maybe both of you, to really just talk about that, because I think sometimes it comes down to language, and you just want to be consistent is all.
Yep.
So, come in there.
Hi, thank you. Well, that's right. As Superintendent Vela said, that it's not in the law. The law specifically says kindergarten through 12th grade, and a process for referral, or nomination, assessment, and identification will be followed, and this is what the district was asked to do. So there's no services for pre-K as such.
But there's no services for kinders either, right? That process doesn't start being identified until 1st grade generally?
No, we refer students in October and November. Their assessments are done in December, and the law requires that the services be provided the first day of the second semester.
Of kinder year, 1st grade?
Kindergarten.
So it sounds like we start the process
Yeah.
there. And so, and I think your question was, should it be pre-K, correct?
So we're trying to make this match what the law is. I was just saying, a lot of our documents say pre-K, so I just wanted to look at consistency, but if that messes up something, we don't necessarily need to do that.
And
But I
that's
just
the
want.
question.
But could you clarify for us the levels of intervention or tiered support that we give for our highly capable at different grade level? Because what we offer at the kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade level is not what we start offering in 3rd grade, correct?
That's right. So kindergarten through 2nd grade, it's called the PEEPS program. That's Primary Educational Enrichment Program. And it is core plus more. So the students who get identified for math and ELA services get provided more interdisciplinary teaching in the classroom through differentiation. The teachers do go through a training. Mostly kindergarten teachers go through a one-on-one training with my elementary specialist. There is a Canvas course as well that they are asked to partake, and so that they're ready on how to differentiate and how to provide enrichment and extension activities. We do have choice menus in our core curriculum that the teachers are asked to use with our students who are identified for highly capable kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. So it's like a cluster model through the general education classroom. When the students get identified in 3rd grade or going into 3rd grade, we have 2 different programs. One is the Odyssey program, which is the self-contained accelerated program. And then we have the ACE program, which is the academic clustered enrichment. Odyssey is accelerated 1 year in math and ELA, and those are the students that show a need for accelerated services. And our ACE students are, again, the ones that need core plus more, so enrichment and extension activities, third grade to sixth grade this year. Next year, it's going to be third grade through fifth year. And then secondary, middle school, we have the MAPS program, which is the middle school academics, advanced academics program. And in high school, it's more based on choice, AP, IB, college and the high school courses and honors courses. We encourage students to continue taking those classes.
And maybe this is off topic, but I just heard no changes to timing that we're doing for our tiered intervention for the highly capable program based off of moving sixth grade, so it's still just 3 through 6? Or 3 through 5?
It's still 3 to 5. Yes.
And to be clear, at high school, whatever the subject is, it's all self-selected, right, for students to get in?
Yes.
I did have a question about the use of the, I'm blanking on the name of it right now. The program the testing that we use for our students to be selected.
The COGAT.
COGAT, thank you. How that was chosen, and again, I don't know, because that's what it's feeling like that's what has to be done here, but I think that's more procedure than policy. And so, but I think that discussion probably would be something that we need to continue to look at.
There are a variety of tools that are used, not simply COGAT. But COGAT is one that you asked specifically. Could you talk a little bit about the screening process in general?
Sure.
And that includes COGAT.
So in second grade, we universally screen our students. That means all students take the COGAT unless parents request that they do not want their child screened. HICAP law, again, tells us or dictates us that we must use multiple objective criteria to identify students, and not a singular score should be allowed to be used to get the student into the program or to keep a student out of the program. It definitely helps us triangulate the data as well. So we use iReady, DIBELS on grades that are available. We use COGAT. We use teacher recommendation. Like again, the law says we use teacher recommendation not to screen them out, but to help us triangulate the data, because there are sometimes what the teachers observe in the classroom does not come up on a test score. So we definitely look for teacher recommendations as well. And then we look for parent inventory surveys in grades that are not universally screened, where parents also provide us information about what they see at home for the student.
And I guess I would just leave with, as far as policy, I'm fine with what the policy says. I think that there's work that we can look at for procedure and how the use of the COGAT test, where we start it, and especially looking at surrounding districts starting first or second grade, and we don't start until third grade for highly capable. I think that there's other things that we can look at as a district, but I don't think that has to do with policy, which is what we're here for tonight.
Yeah, no, certainly that's important pieces. I could do a memory walk of this work with past boards. I think, President Benner, you brought this up, looking at the different types of tools that are used and the biases that are, intended or not intended, however you want to look at it. So we should always be looking at different tools and the disproportionality and all those pieces in the screeners. And so I know we've done that over the years, and we'll continue to do that. Other questions or thoughts?
Going back to the policy end of it, I just wonder if my colleagues would have a problem with starting that off, which we didn't have in there, with every effort will be made to look at the entire program and numbers with an equity lens and minimize any barriers that could prevent our underserved BPOC students from access to apply. I wonder if anybody has a problem with that.
I like it. I think it's great.
The only thing I wonder, looking at the classrooms, I don't think that there's, there actually is I would say, gender slant towards female students compared to male students in our Odyssey programs. And so I just want to, while yes, we need to make sure that we're looking at BIPOC, but also gender balances and things like that. So by calling out just a specific group, I think we just need to look at equity and inclusion generically and making sure that we're looking at, and I just bring out gender as one other type of consideration, and there's more. So that's my, I like the statement. I just think that we might want to even think of being more inclusive in the groups that we're inclusive of.
Don't have a problem with that either.
Okay.
I agree. If we can rewrite that statement and to be more inclusive, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
I do have a suggestion regarding that language that I came up with, if it's okay for me to read it.
Yeah, sure.
To eliminate disparities in highly capable program, the HiCap department will work toward a goal of identifying and serving eligible students of color furthest from educational justice, students receiving MLE services, students receiving free and reduced price lunch, students experiencing homelessness, and students receiving special education services. And I could definitely put the gender in there as well.
That's more eloquent than I am by far.
Other questions? Director Clark? Director
I just have one question. You mentioned that the kindergartens are identified and then they get into the highly capable. Is it the same teacher that teaches both highly capable and?
Yes. The teacher gets trained right before starting to serve the students during second semester.
But what I mean is kindergartens, when they start, how is that teacher going to be able to identify those kids when they haven't received the training?
So we identify the students and then we communicate to the school and the teacher that the student in your classroom has been identified for HiCap services. So this is the training you need to take, and then my specialist goes out to the school to do a one-on-one training with the teacher.
I'm interested in that process. How do you identify?
Sure. So December is when our kindergartners get tested. In January, we get a multidisciplinary team together, which comprises of a principal, myself, my specialists, kindergarten teachers, and some other district officials. We look at the school psychologist and MLE rep as well. We all look at student data. And the data we use for kindergarten is definitely COGAT, the DIBELS, iReady, WAKIDS as well, and looking at them performing at the highest performance level, then we identify students that the student needs highly capable services.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just concerned that usually testing doesn't bode well for kids of color. So I hope that we are taking that into consideration and making sure that we're applying culturally appropriate way of testing.
Absolutely, and if the parents do not agree with our decision, they are definitely encouraged to appeal our decision, and in the appeal, they provide us more information about the HiCap characteristics that they see and observe, and the teachers help us with that as well.
Thanks.
Okay,
Is that it?
That's it.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
so much.
thank you.
Okay, so I take it this is ready to move on. We'll put that new language in that Amron Gerbains has suggested, and I'll get that revised, and then when it comes before the board on May 24th, as long as it's acceptable, you can go ahead and vote on it. If it's not, we'll bring it back. Okay, our next policy is 3415, accommodating students with diabetes. This is the first reading. Director Hamada did not like the wording of the school nurse being appointed. She felt that the language was demeaning. I talked with both Director of Health, Lindy Barron, who is, has Master of Nursing, is a registered nurse, and is a nationally board-certified school nurse, and Amy Patricelli, who also is a school nurse, and neither of them felt it was demeaning, more that it was a position of responsibility. So I thought if the nurses were okay with that, Director Hamada, and they seem to be.
To me, they have to go through a lot of certification, just as appointed. I mean, it just seemed frivolous to me, and I appreciate their comments. Thank you.
And this policy is much more robust than what we have previously had, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but it's quite robust.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
I just, if I may, President Benno, having supervised this health service for some time and this particular area, I know that Director Barron would echo this. Our needs as it relates to students that are either type 1 or type 2 have really grown over the years. And in addition to that, the type of care that's related to it has also grown, and the certification is aligned with that. And thinking about our focus on equity and those pieces, having a policy like this, again, it's just a statement that I'm making, is so critical to providing access to all programming, everything we have to offer to our students, regardless of the diabetes and some of the other challenges that come from a health perspective. So I thank the board for really looking through this, and also thank Director Barron for this as well. And we'll continue to do this as we move forward together. So thank you.
Well, this brings back, this is not geared into the policy. The policy was fine. But I had some questions that I want to see the procedure to that and really link in, because, you know, being the mother of a teacher, I hear that she's doing one thing in the gym and then something else happens, and all these things are happening on the fly. And training in our procedures, so we have as much policy in place with procedure. You know, because it could happen in a hall, it could happen when a gym teacher is busy with another student that has an emergency, and I'm just, you know, as much training in that procedure, so be excited to see that.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
I was going to mimic that too. The school nurses do a lot. And I know just the coordination of the health plans, not just for the students with diabetes, but just all the health plans they have to do in general, it's a lot. And you said that this is more robust because I feel like our school nurses have a lot more responsibilities put on them. So I just want to make sure we recognize and honor that. And
Thank you, President Benson. You said it better than I did.
I did have a question about unrestricted access to restrooms as needed. And just, I guess this is more about the how. I know that we're doing as much as we can to get our students, yes, we have bathrooms throughout all of our schools, but when you're in a portable, how is that universally accepted as still access when they have to leave the portable setting and go into, can we just talk, can I just hear about that?
Yeah, I'll have our Director of Health Services come up and share. I will say that those individual health plans that President Benno referred to are updated yearly.
Okay.
Part of that is the care that it takes. In this case, it's diabetes. It could be any other health need or concern. And that is written out in the plan.
Okay.
The specifics to access and those things, whatever it may be. So certainly if we did have a situation that certainly would need to be back to the training piece, a plan in place so that we have unrestricted access to. So I'll let Director Brown.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Benno and Board Superintendent Vela, Ms. Zantello. As far as access to the bathroom, I think that really is referring to mostly probably secondary schools where you get 3 bathroom classes a semester. You can't do that to a diabetic, right? They may have to go every time during your class, depending on if that's right after lunch, what their blood sugar is doing, et cetera. So, and yes, because I'm in a portable, you can't say, I can't let you out to go to the bathroom because we're in a portable. You need to go before you come. No, they need to be given access to that bathroom at all times.
Okay. And do we take into consideration classroom placements? Again, I know we're doing as much as we can to move our classrooms out of portables, but I think especially in the elementary.
Yes, we certainly do look at that. We look at that too, also in regard to if I'm having a low blood sugar, how far do I have to travel to get to the health room to check that? So those are things that are looked at, and every kid is going to be different. So it's going to be individual depending on how controlled their diabetes is, how we're looking at blood sugars. We do have kids where literally we have a phone, and so we are watching their blood sugar all the time at alarms, so we know when they start to go low, sometimes before they even know it. So we have many mechanisms where we look at that type of thing.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, technology has come
I-
a long
Wow.
way.
Isn't it amazing?
Yes.
We have several friends with diabetes that they're able to watch their kids throughout the day.
Absolutely. Other
Other
questions?
feedback?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we'll go on to the next one with Director Barron right here. And this is the anaphylaxis prevention and response. Director Hamada had said, as you stated earlier, Director Hamada, as this could be a matter of life or death, I'd like there to be a very definite procedure on what exactly happens where and who is responsible for various locations, classroom, gyms, sports fields. Who knows where the medical supplies are kept if the student is not carrying them with them.
So each student is individual and has an individual healthcare plan. And those types of things we can't put in a general procedure because every student's going to be different depending on what activities they're involved in, et cetera, what they're allergic to. And so therefore that information is all covered in their health plan. Where the EpiPen is, what do we need to do in the cafeteria? What do you do if there is a party in the classroom? Those things are all provided within the care plan.
Thank you for elaborating, I appreciate that.
Can I ask why asthma is being taken out? Is that being put in a different policy? Or is that being rolled into anaphylaxis?
No, I think they are looking at separating the two. I don't think the asthma policy has been written up yet from OSPI, but anaphylaxis doesn't always include asthma, and I think that's why they're separating the two.
Awesome, thank you. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Okay, the next one is 2108 Learning Assistance Program. Okay, the Learning Assistance Program, or LAP, is a state-funded program developed to provide supplemental instruction and services for public school students who are not meeting academic standards. For more than a decade, LAP has provided students with extra assistance in basic skills such as reading, writing, and mathematics. During the 2021 legislative session, our legislature passed House Bill 1208, significantly increasing districts' local control of LAP funds, specifically enabling school districts to focus on identifying and addressing deficits in students' basic skills resulting from or exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. House Bill 1208 removed barriers to identifying eligible students and removed several restrictions on using LAP funds, thereby increasing its flexibility. Any questions or comments?
I'd just like to say I made no comments. I like this one.
Yeah, just for the board's knowledge of this is a state fund, not a federal fund. And oftentimes LAP comes with more flexibility. As you saw, they noted that the pandemic did have and still has an impact. And it's allowing districts to still utilize those dollars in a variety of ways. And so I think I've seen it evolve over the years, and the state usually responds well for how districts use this funding.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Can you use LAP funds to provide activity buses so kids can stay for after-school tutoring?
Yeah, so just real quick, learning assistance programs are tied to individual students' need to close the gap or for tutoring. If it is a barrier or something that they need and we need to do that, we've done that, yes. So in short, yes.
But make sure I understand what you're saying, but we need to identify a particular student. I need this service. I wouldn't be able to for this particular student. So then the hard part with that is that it's very student-specific. So if that
Yes.
student moves to a different school, then you don't have the reasoning for the bus
Yeah. so-
because that is by that student. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so simple answer is yes, it's really tied to the student. What is it gonna take to get that student to the additional services they need to be successful? And in this case, it would be after school, because a lot of services are provided during school as well.
Of course, thank you.
Further feedback on this one?
Good to move it forward?
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is policy 3141, non-resident students. This references chapter 28A 225 of the RCW, noting that any student who resides outside of the district may apply to attend a school in the district or file paperwork of the intent to provide home-based instruction and enroll for ancillary services, if any. The district annually informs parents of inter-district enrollment options. The procedure also notifies parents and guardians of the right to appeal the district decision to the superintendent of public instruction or their designee. Director Hamada said, and I'm not sure that we understood this, but just wondering if in some dire cases, very exceptional, we might want to leave room in the wording for discretion. And I'm not sure what you meant by that.
Yeah, that wasn't very clear. I had a lot of things going on to try to get through all these policies again. I just like, let's say if there was something just way out of the ordinary where a child had to go, be let into our district. And I mean, I know we have to have rules and have it fair, but for some unforeseen reason, when we put such rigidity to it, I mean, I don't know. Is there any way that we can make an exception to something that was really dire? It was the child's future, the child had to stay here because, or had to be in a different, I don't know.
I want to make sure we fully grasp your question, Director Hamada. For students that are outside of
Yeah.
the school district boundaries and are from another district, can we make exceptions? And I can't remember what the rest that you had said there, but essentially there is a process for out-of-district
Yeah, I got that.
application. They actually have to request to exit their district first. And then for us, it really falls around space where they are either requesting, sometimes there are different types of transfers that they're asking for. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I'm looking at, sounds like Ms. Simpson's going to talk a little bit more about what those options are, because I want you to really know what we already have in place
Okay,
that I think might answer that.
probably will. Thank you.
Good evening, President Bento, members of the board, Superintendent Villa, and Ms. Santello. So I believe in your question, you're asking, if we had someone from out of the district that really needed to attend here, would we be allowing them in? They would need to apply through a choice of transfer application, because if they don't apply through that, we can't collect any funding for the enrollment. So they would have to go through the choice transfer portal in order to do that. And then mid-year transfers, those would usually, like extreme cases, I meet with those families. And so that would often be, unless there's like tons of space and capacity at a school to allow an additional enrollment to come mid-year. If there isn't, and it's an extreme case, they would be scheduling a meeting with me.
So there is some personal, maybe, communication there that a little bit?
I would say yes, there's individuality looking at their situation. Sometimes it's an employee that maybe lives outside of the district, there's an employee transfer. Sometimes it's due to childcare. They may have childcare that's more in a region or a drop-off area to their job. We've heard a lot of those things, so I think we personalize as much as possible, but also make sure that we have space, because we'd like to have that FTE, actually. But again, we have to make sure we provide and have access to our own kids to make sure that there's not overcrowding in buildings and those kinds of things, so.
So would that include things like, I really want to get into musical theater at Kent Ridge, or I really want to get to IB program at Kent
Yep.
Meridian?
Yep.
Like those kinds of things are taken into consideration?
We've had requests for transfer just specifically because IB is what we offer. We've had, we run the gamut, and that's what we want. We want to, for students to know, we also have a virtual academy that maybe other districts don't have, and so, yes, definitely.
And
My two
those-
questions
Oh, I was
were-
going to add to just that one last one. Those would go through the like traditional transfer window, which is actually open right now until May 31st.
But even if they were out of district, they would still have to go through that choice transfer? Got it, that makes sense, okay.
I was going to ask, so for schools, do we prioritize kids getting into a school that is not their home school first within the district and then for students outside the district?
First, we prioritize our students that are within the district,
Okay,
yes.
good. And then, I lost it. Man. It'll come back.
There is a whole priority within the transfer process that's outlined in, I think it's 3141P.
Yep.
And so you can see kind of where the priorities lie within that transfer process, where school employees, that kind of thing would be higher up in that transfer priority list.
Yep. And I'm sorry, I remembered my other question and it was answered. I just wanted to make sure that we for the virtual academy, that's open and for.
So the virtual academy, actually, they have their own application, very similar to how Kent Laboratory Academy has an application process for that academy school, in which they do take non-resident students.
Thank you.
No, I just appreciate that deeper dive because there's so many things still after 3.5 years that I don't know. And I'm always trying to see that personal touch, which is, we're losing that in so many things, but that we're trying to maintain that. So I appreciate your expertise on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I reread that procedure a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Simpson.
Any other feedback on this?
I'm looking at the last several sentences of that. It says the school district where the student is currently enrolled receiving home-based instructions. Oops.
Might be easier to read this way.
Oh.
The form will gather information such as the child's current legal residence, the school district where the student is currently enrolled or receiving home-based instruction.
Yeah.
That sentence.
Yeah, and also it says the basis of the requesting release from the residence district and a specific building desired and the grade level elementary of course offering secondary in which the student desired to be enrolled in if accepted by the district. So that means if we accept, if the release form, right?
Ms. Simpson, if you'd like to come up.
Can you elaborate on that?
The difference from a release from a different district or release that we are providing.
Right.
So they first need to have an application in which they're released from their other district
Okay.
before we can accept them as a transfer into our district. Because it's the funding that needs to be released in order for them to apply.
So first they have to get that release form before they can come and,
Right,
Yes.
okay.
yeah. And I think I said it, Dr.
Right.
Farah, that if a student wanted to attend a different district, that
Right.
we would have to grant the release as well. So it goes for us, correct?
For us, for both.
Yes.
Yep. So,
So to elaborate more, Kent Virtual Academy, do they need that form, or they can just apply it and then if the space is available, then they get into?
If they're a Kent School District student,
Okay.
they don't need to do any choice transfer. They would fill out the application for the virtual academy. If they're from another district, say
Let's say,
Federal Way, they would
right.
have to go through the choice transfer application and be released from their district to go ahead and apply for Kent Virtual.
So it's same applies even if it's Kent Virtual or any other school?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, it's tied to that FTE. That process is there statewide.
Right.
It's FTE, because remember, they're losing an FTE
Right.
from the sending district, and then we're gaining vice versa, right? So we need to make sure that we have procedures in place to make sure that that's done appropriately. Thank you, Ms. Simpson.
Okay, moving along. Policy 3246. Restraint, isolation, and other uses of reasonable force. This policy is intended to address our district students. It's not intended to prevent or limit the use of restraint or other reasonable force as necessary with adults or other youth from outside the district as allowed by law. Procedures developed to implement this policy, including review, reporting, and parent guardian notification of incidents involving restraint or isolation as required by law. The matching procedure outlines these requirements. Is it easier for you to see it with the changes, or would you prefer to see it with no changes? Do you have a preference with the changes? Okay.
That's my preference.
I have a question. Was this the thing that they were going to eliminate in the state legislature or minimize, do we know? And is that gonna come back? I'm just curious how that'll affect this policy, if you know what I'm talking about.
No? We can check into it for sure.
But we don't believe so.
I know there's still an RCW of the use of force when lawful that's still on the books, and also an RCW that there's a use of force on children, actions presumed unreasonable. So we have those two different RCWs that are still in effect.
There was a change in a bill on restraint. I didn't follow that
I think that's what I'm
really
thinking.
closely, but there was some changes in that in the current legislative session. I do remember that, but I don't know if they affect this.
We can definitely check and
I wasn't following that one real
get back to
closely.
you on that.
Yeah, can we pause on this then and wait until we hear back to know for sure? Or should we move forward?
No, let's pause and then once we find out. Because it affects the statute. If it affects the statute, then we have to.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing
Right.
is cross-reference to the most recent law.
Yeah.
In the event that this was not received by WASDA and then the changes there. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Because we don't want to be against the statute if it's,
No, but I believe that this policy has the most current RCWs in effect, and I'm happy to pull those up if you'd like to look at them. I don't know how it changed, but this was revised in 2021, so I would believe these are the most current RCWs, and the policy was written with these RCWs in mind. So we're following, it's an essential, and the legal RCWs have been followed in this policy.
I think the question the board has is most recent legislation, that's 21. Do we know that 22, 23, this most recent legislation, is included? I think that's your question.
Yeah,
Yeah, because in 2023, there were some
Yeah.
changes on it.
If
what
we,
they're asking.
sorry,
We'll just,
But I don't
Back
know
on
if it
it.
affects this policy directly, because I didn't look at the particulars. Forgive me, I shouldn't have brought that
we'll
up.
definitely check on it.
Should we move forward assuming that it's in line with the law as it's written today? And then if we find out later on that it doesn't, then we
then
would
look at
correct
it.
this during our second reading?
Why don't we do that?
that's fair, and we would not bring it to, final if it's not aligned. So that the board could at least have a work session to be able to do that.
I think that'd be great.
Sound good?
I
So it'll
agree
be
with-
on-
I
sorry.
agree with that, yeah. I
It'll
think-
be on the agenda for May 24th if it is most current. If it's not, we'll bring it back for a second reading.
Good choice.
All right?
Okay.
Sound good? I like that.
Okay. 4215, uses of tobacco, nicotine products, and delivery devices. Let me pull the policy up. WASDA revised this policy to reflect that the minimum age for purchasing tobacco products rose from 18 years of age to 21 years of age effective January 1st, 2020. The change to the law decreased the number of eligible buyers in high school, noting that many people who purchased cigarettes for minors were between the ages of 18 and 20. The change in the law also decreases the number of eligible buyers who are still in high school. And Director Hamada said, "I like the changes made previously." Do you want to elaborate on that, Director Hamada?
Well, I must have done that first time around, because I don't even honestly recall it, but I read it again this time, and I did like the WASDA model, so forgive me, but sometimes
Yeah, sure.
I don't make enough notes to myself what I meant at the time. So I can't elaborate on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any follow-up to this?
I just want to say I struggle sometimes here with this, using this whole system. It moves around.
It's okay.
And sometimes it looks different to me, and I don't know where my stuff went.
That's why we work together as a team to make sure we're providing policy that's aligned, so.
It's the software I have a problem with.
I'm happy to sit down with you on it. I do think one thing that happened is we're in a PDF as opposed to the Word version, and they look different. Good to move ahead?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Policy 6119, uncollected non-tax revenue. As I mentioned earlier, WASDA no longer has this policy. Mr. Rarick wanted to keep this policy. And per the referenced RCW that is in this, it's 28A 635-060, the district may withhold the diploma, but not the grades or transcripts of the student until the student or a parent or guardian has paid for damages. And if they're unable to pay, the district will come up with a community service activity. I know, Director Hamada, you had mentioned about this. The diploma can still be withheld. It's just the grades and transcript that cannot, and that's per law.
I think last night in the 2x2, the director, forgive me, I thought he said that they had even problem doing that anymore. And then he said a lot of the things that we had, you know, way in the past, and I mean, this is going ahead with what's going on the agenda, but that the fines that we used to collect, we don't even collect anymore, so he said it wouldn't, you know. He just wants in there, he just thinks, you know, that we should be able to take these off the books when we need it. That's what I got out of it.
And, you know, they're gone at the WASBO conference. We can certainly get questions to them about it, and we can clarify that. And if that's what the main goal is, I can be sure to let you know that.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Behringer, didn't you two have a little back and forth about that, or is my memory again?
Dr. Behringer, if you'd like to come up, thank you.
President Benham, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Santello, Director Hamada, yes. The goal of the conversation last night was to have this in place so those 6-year marks, we can remove those fines from those families that are no longer affiliated with the district for 6 years at that point. To your point of the fines, a majority of the fines that were on the piece that Director Rarick shared last night, we no longer collect, no longer ask for, we don't do that. And the other piece that you said, remind me? The diploma.
I
That
didn't
is true.
quite understand that, but.
So the diploma plea piece is, yes, that is still the only thing that you can withhold, but we don't, that's like a last thing that we would do. It's not something that we regularly practice, but it is something we still have the ability to do. So.
They still get their transcript, though.
Yep, that's exactly right. They still get their transcripts. They can't withhold their transcripts or their grades or anything like that. It's just the actual piece of paper that they can
That's
withhold.
what-
Which, again, that's not something we practice if we don't have to.
Would we ever withhold somebody's diploma for lunch debt?
No.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you caused damage to a book.
This is more like, I wouldn't even say that would cause them to not have their diploma. I'm talking about maybe like somebody who's caused like physical permanent damage, like arson to a bathroom space where they burnt like a wall or something like that, and it took, I mean, something pretty major. It's not gonna be lunch fines. It's not gonna be a book. It's not gonna be things that are, you know, in the less than $100 range, things like that. I mean, you're talking about pretty significant damage. And at that point, most of our schools do a pretty good job of employing community service and or work-based programs that allow them to work that off when they don't have means. And so it's never a, you know, all or nothing, you owe me $1,200, and if you don't pay me now, I mean, it's not, we just don't do that. That's not how we operate in the Kent School District, so.
Thank you.
Can I push back on that a little bit? I understand that, you know, we're right now, you know, thinking that way. But let's say we're not here and somebody else is making the decision. According to that policy, does not indicate what are the things that will not be held, right? It says, according to this, the district at its discretion will not release the diploma to a student who has made restitution or
Who's not made
damages
restitution.
or has not paid the outstanding bills unless such a release is required by law. Now, that can also include lunch. That can also include library. So can we be more specific so that we want to make sure that that does not happen, because it's on the discretion, right? So that's what my.
And all I can say is that, speaking to practice, it is not our practice to withhold a diploma. Well, in the most recent years, I'd say in the last 4 to 5 years, it is not the Kent School District's practice to withhold a diploma for small fines like books and lunch fees and things like that. But you're absolutely right. To your point, the way that it is written right now, it does allow for that discretion all the way down to $1,
Right.
you know, all the way up to the largest types of fines. So.
Would that be something for the procedure then, or would that have to be in the policy? I guess that's for Pam. I don't know.
We can bring it back to Mr. Rarick with your comments and suggestions. And if he, you know, feels that the language should be revised, we can put this on for a second reading at the next
Thank you.
policy work session. Is that what you guys would
Appreciate
like
it.
to do?
I think
Good forethought.
also, answer to the question though, yes, it can be. Procedure, it needs to be in alignment with the policy, so we could accentuate it in the procedure. Channeling Mr. Rarick, the real purpose of this, and I'm glad you caught that, Director Farah, because discretion means, you know, whatever it could be, so we'll work on that language. Really, it was around uncollectible debt. Yeah, students, I know when he gives me his updates, we talk about, you know, numbers that have been on the books for years and years, and they're no longer here. That's what he really wants to be able to do with this language, but we'll come back to the board with the other pieces that you've requested.
Yeah, they knew they would be gone and not able to answer the questions and asked that we take questions. So it's good to defer it to the next policy work session. More?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Please.
The other part of it is, I'm an accountability freak with my kids and everything else. And I'm all for kids, you know, getting their diplomas and not having lunch fines and stuff like that. But we haven't said that, you know, you can't walk away from things you've done. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Totally understand, and again, the district is in a place, from a fiscal perspective, when we no longer are able to collect from students we don't know where they are, and then they've left us for some time, and so I do know that we have years and years of debt on our books.
Yeah, I saw the dollar
That's not good
amount.
for the system. And so this is, again, channeling him, but I totally understand that piece. But know that we do everything we can to be able to do that, but it's difficult when you don't.
Yeah,
know where they
I
are.
get the other part of it,
Yeah.
definitely.
So we'll come back.
Definitely. Okay, we're on to policy 1210, annual organizational meeting. This is a second reading, and this is a discretionary policy. So a couple of things. President Mena was not here, but he had asked about the line policies will continue from year to year and board to board until and unless the board changes them. That's only for the public's information, because I think not everybody knows that, and that's why it's been put in there. It's updated to note that the legislative rep position is for a 2-year period. As was referenced during last Wednesday's regular board meeting, KSD's policy is different from WASDA's in that the qualifications to serve as an officer is not the same. I went back and looked at the July 19th, 2019 policy work session on this policy when the changes were made, and the board laid out the reasons why they thought that that line should come out. But again, this is a discretionary policy, and it's up to this board to decide what they want to do with that. They've also noted in here that a roll call vote is necessary for both the selection of superintendent and board officers, and that's more for the idea of accountability and participation in the voting. Director Hamada wrote that her thoughts on abstention should apply to all voting unless a person just got on the board and has no time to be knowledgeable at all on what they're voting on. Director Hamada also suggested that instead of a replacement will be elected immediately, it should read elected in a timely manner. So, discussion, board?
I'm a little confused on that, Leslie. I mean, in standard organization, if for any reason the president is not available, the vice president simply fills, and then you come back and hold an election.
I didn't have any problem with that.
Oh, well, what
No,
am
I think that
reading?
that's actually supports your language. She was saying, right now it says immediately and make it in a timely fashion, so then you
Yeah.
just naturally have the vice president fill in until
Yeah.
it is appropriate
I have no
time.
problem with that, Tim.
I just have an issue with the language which says the person who newly elected, who doesn't have knowledge of what might be going on.
Oh, as far as what Director Hamada had
That-
suggested.
yeah. So that's my only concern, is that it could be possible that somebody who gets on the board can have the knowledge and be able to.
And it's not in our current policy.
No, I was just making a
Yep.
philosophical
Right,
statement.
right.
Nobody
I
else
agree,
has to
I agree.
agree with it.
Right.
I totally understand
just wanna-
everybody else's position, but
I just wanted to bring that up, just in case this policy will be holding us for the foreseeable future, so.
So that's why the board has to decide, come to a consensus, not a full-on majority, or, I'm sorry, a majority, but not everyone in agreement, but whether we leave the policy as is or revert back to WASDA's model with the newly elected or appointed members not being qualified to hold office. But again, it's the board's decision. I just wanted to let you know why when I looked at the June 2019 board policy work session on this policy, it had the board members talking this all over and bringing up a lot of great points. And that's why they decided to take that line out. They felt that the person could be qualified and should be qualified, even if they were newly appointed.
I like the statement which says, taken out immediately in a timely manner. That also was one thing we would like to change that.
So consensus on that language of timely manner as opposed to immediately is good language?
Isn't that crossed out though, or is it elsewhere?
No, that was a suggestion from Director Hamada only, about the timely manner. Are we talking about the same thing?
Because on the first paragraph there, the last sentence is crossed out. Isn't that language that we're not looking at, or is it somewhere else
We're
I'm not
looking-
seeing?
This has been just updated to show what WASDA's is, but I wanted to let you know that what the board had done previously, and by taking that language out. So the board needs to come to consensus. Is that still good? Is that still what the board wants?
Director Farah, if I may, I'd like to have Mr. Brockvogel come up and we've had extensive conversations about state law versus our policy, our current one, which you're seeing. So I'm glad we're engaging in conversation about that language, about immediately, because that does put us in contradiction with what state law does say that they would assume. However, anyway, but I wanted him just to come up and just talk a little bit about aligning board policy with state law and your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, President Beno, members of the board, and Madam Clerk. We have looked at this immediate language, and Director Hamada correctly points out it's very troublesome because there is no way to comply with the term immediate. It's an infinite set of possibilities, and it really rubs up against the principle of automatic succession that Director Clark points out, and that's adopted in Robert's rules. So I think it's appropriate to get rid of, from a legal sense, get rid of the term immediately. That'll coincide with state law.
And I just want a timely manner, because that gives us time to,
I think that term implies consistent with state law too, so
Yeah.
it's doubly effective.
Yeah, and I wanted him to come up and just share, that was the real difference in this, and so Director Farah, I just wanted him to come up and share that piece.
I mean, assuming good intent, that it would be done when we could, right?
yeah.
I mean, people who would not assume good intent would say, like, people can abuse that and push until the next election. But assuming good intent, we mean that that's what happened as soon as we possibly can get to it.
That's
I
what
like that.
timely manner
That's what timely
means.
manner means.
Supposedly.
Supposedly, right. I think my only problem, and we already talked to our lawyer about that, is the comment about, like, abstentions are not considered votes. And I'm like, this is my free body, and if I want to abstain, I can. I understand what they're saying. I agree that we should vote for contracts and evaluations and board officers, but I just always want an option to not.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you, yeah, you definitely, and Mr. Brockwell will just share for our community the legal sense.
Right, we talked a little bit about this offline. So we looked at it, MRSC's guidance says local bodies can fill in the gaps about what abstentions mean. It can be deemed a yes vote, a no vote, but the Roberts rules really say it's a nullity in the voting. It's not an affirmative this or that. But I think that the statutory scheme that this is based on is one that encourages board participation and transparency. It has a roll call feature. It's one of those sort of exceptions to the Roberts rules in that it requires 3 instead of the majority of those present. So it will require 3. It will require an up or down vote from an individual. It's a little quirky, but you're right. No one can force you to do anything. The best that this board can do is come up with rules that are enforced by a censure or something like that.
So to follow that explanation, if it's not allowed and someone chooses not to, it doesn't really say what happens then. So if it's a no vote, so then you're still without that, you don't move forward.
What we've talked about offline that maybe scratch everybody's itch here is that it would be a policy preference, something like abstentions should not be made under these, when we're appointing officers or filling a vacancy. And that, but it should not be, no one should abstain except as required by state law. And as you recall, there's a whole body of law on abstentions for conflicts of interest, remote interests in contracts, and those kinds of things, like 3 or 4 things that Buzz takes us through. So I think that's a good thing. It allows you to be circumspect, to understand that there's a preference that you've adopted, that you should vote on these more weighty things. This isn't, say, for example, authorization of a $2,000 contract or authorization to accept a gift. It's the appointment of your superintendent. It's the election of your officers. And that's why the statute sort of makes this distinct. But if we put that kind of language in there, it reminds us that abstentions are okay as long as they're required by state law, and it's still discretionary. You know, in the end, you could have something that says no abstentions, but how is that enforceable? It's only enforceable by a censure. Somebody could threaten a recall, but it's not going to have any merit to it. And so I think the best we do is create a policy preference that you're reminded about how to vote on these things. And we too. So when we're come in, we're prepared, we know what the policy is.
And then would we follow up with a policy of what happens?
If they don't?
Yes.
I think you can. It's certainly an option, but we know that the board has certain rules that are enforceable by censure. And you don't need to specifically name those each time for each rule. If somebody, for example, takes the dais and abstains for 3 months in a row on every vote, this board may well be upset. And they may well censure them, and it may be a valid thing, and it may be subject to a recall. I don't know. It's a little more valid in that circumstance.
I guess I think about less in the individual, but is the rest of the vote still valid? So you have 4 out of 5, somebody abstains.
Yeah.
Is it then a majority vote of 4, or is the vote null? And that's what it seems like it's silent on.
The vote would carry because it's the majority of the board.
Okay.
The typical rule is the majority of those in attendance. So we've had votes carry here on other matters, not the appointment, but other matters with a 2-1 vote. And so, yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
I think the point, though, correct me if I'm wrong, and my philosophy is my philosophy. It doesn't have to be everybody's. I understand others on abstentions, but on the, it's law that we have to do it on the contract and on our officers, right? That you can't abstain. It's RCW.
It's an RCW that you have a roll call and each person is called upon to vote.
Not abstain.
I don't think that
I
law.
read it. I thought I
Yeah,
read it.
I guess I disagree with you on that. If you had a bona fide conflict that's otherwise prohibited by state law, then you'd be required to abstain. I can't, offhand think of that, but perhaps somebody's wife or spouse.
No, I'm only talking about 2 specific things in the RCW. It states on the roll call for officers, and it states on the evaluation of the superintendent, you can't abstain, just those 2.
I don't think it says
I
that.
thought I read that in it.
Yeah.
Forgive me, but I could be wrong.
We stumbled on that too. We looked at it very closely and we thought, does it really say that? Does it really require a board member to vote? And I just don't think you get there, because there would be those circumstances where state law could creep in and supersede that. So it'd be duty bound to have a remote interest disclosed or one of those quirky things that comes up. I don't know I can't imagine how it would come up, but I don't think the law says you have to vote. I just don't see it. I just don't see that saying that you have to. Think about this. How would you enforce that, as to Director Margell's point?
Oh, I don't like any of it.
Yeah,
I'm just-
but I think if it came down
going
to
with
it.
what I read,
But if it came down to it, Director Ramada, I mean, you couldn't, the remainder of the board couldn't file a lawsuit to get somebody to say something. A judge would laugh it out of court. So,
I'm reading the RCW right now, and I don't see any things about no abstentions.
Well, I'm not going to do this.
but to your point, we read it that way initially too, that you have to vote.
No, I'm reading, it doesn't say you can't
Right,
abstain.
right.
It says that it's a majority vote and it's a roll call vote.
Yeah, right. And that's sort of where we landed. But we went down that road too, and we looked at it closely. So I don't know if that gives you any comfort, but.
If I may, for the board to consider, right? We've gone through very detailed conversation about interpreting that law. I would only ask the board to consider your role as a whole in conducting business for the district under this board superintendent governance team, as a team. Related to your most important role in hiring a superintendent, that's one, and also the officers' roles that you also play. Those are critical. We also had that conversation, have been in the situation where what can arise when this goes back to the immediately, and what now sounds like the board is moving toward. there's all kinds of things that can impact in a timely manner. Illnesses, things like that, things that are out of our control. And I say that in that we still have to conduct business. And I think I'll just leave you with that as we continue to have this healthy conversation.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we'll make the changes to the language of the two topics we talked about and put it before you May 24th. If it's not what you want, we'll move it to the next one in June.
Sorry, what were the two? It was,
In a timely manner, and then we're talking about the abstention piece.
okay. So are we keeping
What
the
did we
link?
agree with?
What do we, I sort of know,
I don't know what we
what do we,
agreed upon.
what did we agree on the abstention?
Timely.
No, I agreed, I
Abstention,
got the
the
timely.
abstention.
We were going to put in a sentence that expresses a preference of the board, a policy preference, which would be a board member may abstain or choose to abstain as required by state law or something like that. It would express a preference,
Okay.
but also allow you the opportunity to abstain.
Okay.
So
I like that.
I don't have a problem. I can live with that.
So are we keeping the language in here? I don't know, for some reason, that a newly appointed board member will not be eligible to serve as an officer unless the majority of the board has been
We
appointed?
talked about that too, didn't we? We didn't come to a conclusion.
Yeah, I thought it was more you wanted to keep it as is. That's the feeling I got, not with the language of the new officer being in there. Taking that part out and keeping the current policy that KSD has. You
So
want
it
to
would
talk
read exactly, would you summarize that, please? Just so we were accurate.
Sure. So we would take this language out, because it's not what we have right now anyway. This is the language we have at the moment, and let me put it in where you can see it without the markup.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, thank you.
And we've just crossed out, a newly appointed board member will not be eligible to serve as an officer unless a majority of the board has been appointed. Our language currently does not have that in there. It was changed in 2019. Ours has been updated since WASDA's to take that line out. And if you listen to the June 2019 work session, there were a lot of reasons why. For instance, Director Clark had been a board member before and came back. Would he be considered newly appointed? That was one of the reasons. We have, how should I say, there are many more reasons to leave this out than to put it back in. And most of it is that they're perfectly qualified to hold that position.
I agree.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. But, I'll put it together the way we've talked about with those changes, and you can look at it and decide at that point if you want to move it forward for the vote for approval. Sounds like you're on the same page, though.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
thank you. We are at the last policy.
Can I make a request?
Sure.
Is that possible? I'm looking, we have 8 minutes, and I'm wondering, based on conversations from before, is 8 minutes going to be enough to talk about this, or do we want to push this to the next meeting? And I'll leave that up to my colleagues.
I agree, we leave it for the next meeting.
And we can't extend till 7:30 tonight?
No, we can't extend, we have to be done at 7.
have to-
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
We have a lot of discussion about that, so
Sounds like the consensus is to move it
8
to the
minutes is
next.
not enough.
I would need
Session.
20 minutes alone.
We'll carve it out for you.
President Margell, I'm not sure couldn't go with. Yeah, no, we hear you, and we'll go ahead and move it to our next one. That said, Ms. Holly, have we covered all of the other,
Everything.
you want to summarize for us, just since we have a couple of minutes, to summarize
Sure.
what will be moving, what will be coming back?
Out of the 10 policies, we have 2 that will not be moving forward for approval on May 24th. And that is this current up 4220 and 6119, the uncollected non-tax revenue. So I'll make the other changes to the policies as the consensus has allowed and bring those 8 to you on May 24th for voting and approval, possibly or not. And the others will move to June 21st.
I do have a comment, Ms. Holly. Your work in this, since you started, has really been exemplary. I mean, it's been a lot more detailed and going over that. I can see it in all the different things, and I just personally, and I'm sure the board feels the same way.
Thank you. I
Appreciate you
appreciate that.
taking this on and
Thank you.
doing a great job.
Thanks.
I was going to say something similar, Leslie, so thank you for saying that. Yeah, I really appreciate the depth of knowledge that we have coming into this and doing all this work. It's been really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, President Bennell, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome, thank you. It is 6:54, we're 6 minutes early, so we are going to conclude our special session.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.